Highlands United Church early on Sunday morning and recording because sadly our system is down once again this week. You may notice that last week's service was recorded and is in the YouTube channel now. And we're recording early so that this can get posted in time for our usual worship time. So presumably you're arriving, it's about 10 o'clock, and you're receiving this. This will be a kind of a abbreviated version of what is happening at Highlands this morning for Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, wherever you are. This is Canadian Thanksgiving, but there are people from all over the place who come to worship here. So happy Thanksgiving to all of you, wherever you are. So the service this morning is based on the scripture reading from the Hebrew Bible from Deuteronomy, and it imagines Moses standing on the banks of the Jordan River, and he's giving advice to the people of Israel, having spent 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, fed by manna in the wilderness and cared for by God, and they finally come to the Jordan River, and before they cross, he is speaking to them about how life ought to be when they're settled, how life ought to be when life is good for them, how they ought to relate to God and relate to each other. So I'm going to give you a bit of the story, and I'm going to share with you the reflection for today, and that will get posted, presumably that is posted by the time you're watching it. I'm sorry that that our system did not work out as well as we always want it to, and we're working really hard on getting that fixed. So will you join me as I read for you the story from the Bible, Deuteronomy chapter 26, 1 to 11. Moses says, "When you have come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess, and you possess it, and you settle in it, you shall take some of the first fruits of all the fruit of the ground which you harvest from the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you shall put it in a basket, and you will go to the place where the Lord your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. And you shall go to the priest in that place, who is in office at the time, and you shall say to the priest, 'Today I declare to the Lord your God that I have come into the land that the Lord swore to our ancestors to give to us.' And when the priest takes the basket from your hand and sets it down before the altar of the Lord your God, you shall make this response before the Lord your God. 'A wandering Aramean was my ancestor. He went down into Egypt and lived there as an alien, few in number, and there he became a great nation, mighty and populous. And when the Egyptians treated us harshly and afflicted us by imposing hard labor on us, we cried to the Lord, the God of our ancestors. And the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. The Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with a terrifying display of power and with signs and wonders, and brought us into this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So now I bring you the first of the fruit of the ground that you, O Lord, have given me. And you shall set it down before the Lord your God and bow down before the Lord your God. Then you, together with the Levites and the aliens who reside among you, shall celebrate with all the bounty that the Lord your God has given to you and to your household." Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Thanks be to God. You know, as a kid, the main story of Thanksgiving that I remember, like way back when I was wee, and that I remember seeing in popular culture, was that story of Thanksgiving, you know, the one where ships come from Europe and land, and one of them is called the Mayflower, and they have turkey. That's my childhood memory of it, and I'm sure they were thankful for that. Well, the story of Thanksgiving, it's way older than that. I discovered one of the earliest recorded Thanksgiving feasts that took place by European settlers anyway on this land was instigated by Samuel de Champlain 419 years ago in the little Port Royal when they were struggling with scurvy. They were not surviving well. And so he instituted a kind of a rotating dinner feast that gave them the nourishment they needed to survive. And they were grateful. And there's a story even older than that. 447 years ago, in the far north, Martin Frobisher and his crew survived the ice and a freak set of storms in what is now known as Nunavut, and shared a feast to thank God for what he called their strange and miraculous deliverance. Saved by God, saved from peril, thankful. The story of Thanksgiving feasts actually goes back way further in many, many, many different cultures. They celebrate some form of harvest festival, some form of Thanksgiving festival. And in this case, we go back to 1,000 years before Jesus' time at least. And Moses and the Hebrew people and the celebration of first fruits that come from that, and the story that they told at first fruits festivals. How God had nurtured them in the wilderness, how God had liberated them from slavery, how they had been an oppressed people, and how God had set them free. This Thanksgiving thing is ancient and present in so many different cultures. But it is a basic thing for people of faith. We give thanks for life to the one who offers us life. And we tell stories around that Thanksgiving. It's important to think about, though. What stories are we telling? I have to confess, though, I this year, as I read the story that the Hebrews told around their first fruits festival, their Thanksgiving, of a community gathered to give thanks to God for making them a strong nation and for saving them through wilderness wanderings. I mean, I'm good so far. And then how God gave them a land that was not theirs before and that people were living in. I started to feel a little queasy about it. I thought, that land is in great dispute today and has been for centuries. That land where people are suffering. And the idea that one group of people would claim divine right over that land, over all other peoples, because their story tells them that they did, and that their God gave it to them. Well, it just doesn't seem right. It's based on and as part of my discomfort in this whole story is rooted in what happened in this land that we're standing on now, and the mistaken belief that our God desired our people to be on this land and claim it as theirs, irrespective of who was here before. Our stories of where we came from can be misused, turned to become stories of oppression, not stories of thanksgiving. I have a deep respect and appreciation for the salvation history of the Hebrew people. It is a story of beginnings in great suffering and persecution and slavery. It is a story of liberation, of being set free, but a story of being nourished by God in their time of vulnerability in the desert, guided by God through strange lands. And I love that this story would be retold humbly once a year in a First Fruits Festival. Not that they would bring the first fruits, the very best of what they were able to grow on the land. Not the leftovers, but the very best. Cream of the crop from this land that they didn't used to be on, that really was never theirs and really still isn't. It really still belongs to God. That humility I have great respect for. And in that Thanksgiving feast, they would recount the story of their vulnerability. And I love that they would include, near the end there, remembering all the people who reside on that land. And the strangers in the land. They call them aliens within the scripture reading. That there we are made to live in a land, but we're also made to live together with other people who are different from us. How far the current disputers over this land have strayed from that humility and simplicity of a Thanksgiving story. Michael Margolis once said, "The stories we tell literally make the world. If you want to change the world, you need to change your story." And I think that is true, and one of the sources of division and suspicion in the world today are the stories people tell about other people based on perceived ethnic backgrounds or sexuality or skin color, or just like perceived based on not knowing them. Conspiracy theories proliferate on the internet based on false stories, false narratives. And we watch as these stories shape the world in ways that God would not want. One of the greatest storytellers of our time, in Canada anyway, is the late Stuart McLean. You remember the stories of Dave and Morley and the Vinyl Cafe? I mean, they made us laugh and sometimes cry. We shook our heads at the mess Dave found himself in and how he somehow emerged gracefully, humbly. Through the lives and the escapades of Dave and Morley, Stephanie and Sam and their dog Arthur, and Bert and Mary Turlington and Jim Schofield and all the rest of the characters that Stuart conjured up, that we got this clear message that we are common in our humanity, that we bleed like everyone else, that somewhere along the line our hearts will be broken and we will need each other to get ourselves through together. And the neighbors will irritate us, but they're humans too. That there's a kid inside of each one of us, that we all make mistakes. All these core messages are embedded in these stories that have been gifted to us. And they create how we are and who we are. These stories are the kind of stories that build bridges, that help us become more loving and more human and more thankful for the life we've been given. And this is Thanksgiving. I hope you will have a chance to eat with someone else. It is around tables that some of the very best stories come out. And if you get to do that, I hope that you will also get the chance to tell a story or two. And if you do, I hope that the stories that you share with one another will make you feel small. By that I mean humble in the face of the wonder and enormity of life, the life that God has made. And I hope these stories will make you feel loved as part of the human family, because you are loved by God. I hope these stories will make you feel blessed to simply be alive. And most of all, I hope they will make you feel grateful to God for all that you've been given in your life, for the blessings of this life. Happy Thanksgiving.